Could Count Dooku be considered a rebel hero? Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, I'm your host AJ Starkiller. Welcome back to my personal SK basement, hence the robe. It's a little bit cold down here. Don't forget, if you like this video or if you want to tell me how crazy I am, hit the like button, leave a comment, share it with your friends to have a good laugh, subscribe, all that good, wonderful YouTube stuff. Let's talk about Count Dooku.
He is a political idealist, not a murderer.
As a historian, one of my favorite things to discuss is how people can be perceived differently based on context and access to information. So someone can be a hero to a certain group of people and a villain to another just based on like their proximity to their crimes or just the people that they were working on behalf of. And I think that Count Dooku really represents that specific kind of nuance within the Star Wars galaxy at large. Bad Batch Season 2 has been already giving us some examples of this conflicting Dooku legacy, and then we also got some of that in the Tarkin novel way back in 2015. I think it was. We got some examples of that there as well. So let's talk about all the different kind of facets that make up Dooku's legacy, and we'll start with what the galaxy at large sort of thinks about him and go from there.
Powerful you have become, Dooku. The dark side I sense in you.
I've become more powerful than any Jedi. Even you.
I do think it's important to go ahead and start off by acknowledging the fact that nobody in the galaxy knows about Darth Tyrannus. No one knows that Count Dooku is a Sith Lord, because they don't know that the Sith are even a thing. If you have a Jedi, or if you have a lightsaber and magic powers, you're a Jedi, and that's about as far as it goes for most people. But what people do know about him is the fact that he is a Jedi, or was a Jedi, and that he's the leader of the CIS, the Confederacy of Independent Systems, at war with the Republic. Now, looking at him as the leader of the CIS, obviously some people will have negative opinions based on that. You know, the CIS committed war crimes too. Lots of people died because of their battles. But the same is also kind of true of the Republic. You know, the Republic is not innocent of people dying in war, of civilians dying. So I think a lot of non-combatants in war tend to take the position that both sides are terrible until one or the other outright affects them directly. So I feel like that idea isn't necessarily going to just bury Dooku no matter what, especially when you realize that the Republic becomes the Empire, and that's going to affect things. The one thing I did want to bring up in reference to the CIS is that Palpatine was incredibly aware of public perception and of optics, and it is not a coincidence that the Republic uses a clone army. In the book Dark Disciple, Dooku is having a fundraiser. He's talking to a bunch of separatist leaders, and one of the things he brings up about the corruption of the Republic is the fact that they use human cannon fodder in the form of these clones. That these clones are living, breathing human beings, and the Republic sees fit to just slaughter them en masse. Whereas the CIS, on the other hand, uses battle droids. Now, we could argue the humanity of battle droids, but most people in the universe, in the Star Wars universe, tend to value droid life and droid sentience far below human life. So it was an excellent way to kind of dehumanize the Republic, and it was obviously part of Palpatine's plan, but I wonder how that's going to affect Dooku's legacy. You know, does that, at least in some part, paint him as kind of a benevolent warlord who used droids rather than sending his people, his loyal subjects, into combat? Like, does that change how people would think about him?
It is obvious that this contest cannot be decided by our knowledge of the Force, but by our skills with a lightsaber.
I want to double back real quick and talk about Dooku and his relationship to the Jedi Order and how the galaxy would view that. Because like we said, nobody knows about the Sith. They just know if you have a Jedi, or if you have a lightsaber and magic powers, you're a Jedi. They know that much. And so, as we learn in the Tarkin novel, there is a subset of people who believe that Dooku was always a Jedi. Even though he was vocal about leaving the Order, they think that was a smokescreen, and that the entire war was really just a fabrication, a cover-up for Dooku to be able to destroy the Republic and for the Jedi to take over. So there will always be a subset of people who think that Dooku was always a Jedi, and this was a giant conspiracy theory that culminated with them attempting to assassinate Palpatine. That is definitely going to continue forward as like pro-Empire propaganda, and I think that's yet another really interesting aspect of the way that people's perception of the Jedi themselves is going to affect their perception of Count Dooku.
You think Dooku funded his war effort by only stealing from outside worlds? No. He took from us, his own people. His quest for power is why our city is now buried in rubble.
In that clip from Season 2, Episode 2 of The Bad Batch, we get a very personal version of the damage that Dooku has done. We learn that on the planet of Sereno, his own people view him as a tyrant who was willing to sacrifice his people and his land to further his ambitions to win this personal war. And what's really interesting about that is when we look at the book, the audio drama, Dooku Jedi Lost, we learn that the whole reason Dooku left the Jedi Order was for the people of Sereno. He wanted to return to them and help them to be sufficient from the Republic, that they weren't left wanting in their time of need. And that's how he ends up leaving them. And that's going to be his legacy among the Serenians. And surely there will be other people who hear about the story of how he treated the people of Sereno. And I just think, again, that's a tick in the negative counter, but it's another interesting thing for sure.
Dooku was right in the end. He knew the Republic was corrupt, that it would collapse and become something worse. He saw it coming. The Galactic Empire.
So this is where things get really interesting. Episode 3, Season 2 of The Bad Batch, we see Desex, and so this is where things get really interesting, because in Season 2, Episode 3 of The Bad Batch, we meet the Governor of Desex, and she views Dooku as a hero. And here's the thing, she was an ally of the Republic, but she looks at it now and goes, Dooku was right the whole time, because he espoused the dangers of the Republic. He warned people that the Republic was corrupt and what would happen if they stayed with them, and in the end, they became the Empire and he was right. Now, of course, they don't know what we know behind the scenes, that Count Dooku was working with Palpatine the whole time to rig this whole thing. As far as they know, Dooku was the person who stood up and was basically a prophet and told them this bad thing is going to happen if you stick with the Republic, and he was right. So this is where the conversation gets really interesting as to what Count Dooku's legacy is actually going to be within the universe. So what I really want to know is, what do you think the overwhelming history of Count Dooku is going to be? Like, do you think it's going to be that he was a corrupt Jedi who fabricated an entire war just to orchestrate the downfall of the Republic and establish Jedi dominance? Do you think he's going to be remembered as a tyrannical leader who sacrificed his people and his planet to further his own ambitions and to fight his personal war? Or do you think he's going to be the first rebel hero who took arms against a corrupt republic and tried to warn people of the empire that inevitably came about? Because all of these are equally valid perspectives depending on your understanding of history, your proximity to his crimes, and just your general perspective. I really like this nuance that this adds to Star Wars, because it is interesting to wonder what people thought about this. Like, I liken it to a real world political figure like Che Guevara. Now, I am not going to talk about Guevara on this channel, But if you look him up, he is a very polarizing figure, with some people claiming he's a hero, some claiming he's a villain, and cases being made on both sides that, again, depending on your understanding, your perspective, and your proximity, you are going to change how you feel about a figure like that. And I just think it's cool to have that sort of discussion about the internal history of a character in Star Wars. And what I really want to know also is, how are the textbooks going to talk about Count Dooku? Like, what do the sequel trilogy era textbooks look like when it comes to discussing the Clone Wars? Because I'm sure they discuss the bad things that Dooku did that everyone knows about, but ultimately, do they have these kind of debates in school about whether or not he was justified, whether he was a good person? Even as early as the very beginnings of the rebellion, or even like 10 years into the rebellion, what do people think about, or rather into the Imperial era, what do people think of Count Dooku? Like, Mon Mothma was there during the Clone Wars. What does she think about Count Dooku now, as in, say, like the Andor era? What does she think of him by then? And there's one character in particular that I really think would be interesting to hear his thoughts about, and that's Luthen Rael. Because Luthen is very much a sacrifice 100 people for the greater good kind of person. He is very much the kind of person I could see admiring Count Dooku in a way. Looking at him as a prophet like the Governor of Desex does. I could see Luthen finding reasons to agree with Count Dooku, to say that Count Dooku was right. And I just think that that is incredibly interesting, because we, of course, know that none of this discussion matters from the outside. None of this discussion matters to us. To us, he is Count Dooku, but he is also Darth Tyrannus. He is a Sith. He's working with Palpatine. All of these things are, like, he wasn't a herald of the evil of the Republic. He was working to establish that empire. You know, we know that. Externally, none of this matters. But internally, does someone like Luthen Rael, who we would consider a good guy, like he's on the side of the good guys, does he consider Count Dooku a villain? Does he consider Count Dooku to be a hero? I just think it's really cool that we're able to have those kind of discussions. And that's really what this video is kind of all about. Anyway, if you were ever curious what kind of stuff keeps me up at night, this is the kind of stuff. I absolutely love talking about this stuff. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button here. If you think I'm absolutely crazy, leave me a comment telling me how bad this is. Share this video with your friends either way. Go ahead and subscribe for more content like this. And don't forget to check out other platforms like Twitch and TikTok at Jedi_Starkiller. Pretty much everywhere better content creators are found. But until next time.
You are now leaving the SK base. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And never forget, the Force will be with you, always.